Right. So for today's lesson is forms of government, unit 4. So we have covered 3 units thus far, and we are moving on to the forms of government. So when it comes to governments, there are various ways you can uh, define a government. There are various ways for you to categorize governments. When you take a government and when you take a government from a different country, right, there can be differences. So there's something called classification that we do, that we put them into different categories. So when it comes to governments, there are various ways you can categorize these governments. In this unit, we are going to take a look at two of these categorizations. Now, as I told you before, governments can be categorized in various different ways. Now, the previous syllabus of political science dealt with many of these categories. Here we are mainly looking at two. Okay. So this is number one, forms of government according to how sovereign power is shared and organized. That's number one, right? Secondly, forms of government according to the structure of the executive. These two are the ones that you need to look into. I have, of course, included other formats of governments as well, right? But that's not a part of the syllabus. That's for your additional knowledge. So I will be briefly discussing the other ones that are not included in this lesson. Just for your knowledge, I'll be discussing those as well. Okay. So first, we need to look how you categorize governments according to how sovereign power is shared and organized. Okay. So there are mainly 4 ways. Technically speaking, there are mainly 2 ways, unitary and federal here. Okay. Unitary and federal. And apart from that, you can further divide them into like semi-federal and confederates, right? So we need to look into what the unitary model is and what the federal model is. So in the notes it says forms of government according to how sovereign power is shared and organized. Although in theoretical politics, sovereign power is indivisible and impossible to share, in practical politics, sovereign power is often shared and organized in different formats. Governments can be categorized according to this fact. Those are the categories: unitary model, federal model, semi-federal model, and confederates. Okay, right. So what does this mean? What does this mean? So there are two things that you need to, more like two units, two institutes that you need to be familiar with here. Central governments and regional governments. Okay, what is a central government? Basically the government that you have in charge of the entire country. That's a central government. What is a regional government? A small government that is in charge of a certain area of the country. Okay. If you take our President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and the Parliament and Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa and the fellow cabinet ministers, that's the central government. And of course, you have regional governments, such as like the Colombo Municipal Council, Western Provincial Council, Central Provincial Council. These are governments, small governments that are in charge of a certain area. Those are regional governments. Okay, let's make something very clear. There is something a lot of teachers get wrong. It's okay that they get that wrong. The problem is sometimes they teach this wrong. That confuses the student completely when they begin this lesson itself, right? Some teachers may tell you, right, or some articles or some sources, whatever, right, may tell you if there are central government as well as regional governments in a certain country, it's a federal country, right? If there are no regional governments and you only have the central government, that's a unitary country. False, incorrect, right? Completely wrong. That's the first thing you need to be clear. Unitary does not mean that you don't have regional governments. Okay? If someone says the unitary countries where you only have the central government, there are no regional governments, that's completely inaccurate. Okay? First thing you need to be clear with. Pretty much every country in the world has regional governments because one central government can't control the entire country. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, as a president, he can't come and look whether they've collected the garbage from every lane in a certain town. which is why you have a municipal council or an urban council, right? Gotabaya Rajapaksa can't come and check each and every school in Sri Lanka, which is why you have a provincial council, a provincial education ministry, right? Provincial education minister. So every country you have regional governments, unless the country is really small, like the Vatican City, where like the country is literally just one city, right? In that case, maybe you don't need, but every country you have regional government. That's something normal. Okay, so saying that unitary means there are no regional governments, that's completely inaccurate then and there. Okay, so what is the actual difference? What is the correct difference if that is incorrect? I have responsibility to tell you what's correct also if I say that is incorrect, right? So what is correct? First thing you need to be clear with is every country has regional governments, as I told you. If these regional governments are independent from the central government, that's federal. If these regional governments are not independent from the central government, that's unitary. That is the difference. Unitary means not that there are no regional governments, right? Unitary means the regional governments are not independent from the central government. Okay, Sri Lanka, we have 9 provincial councils, right? And so many other municipal councils, urban councils, and divisional councils, Pradeshi Sabha, right? But all these institutes, all these small regional governments are under the control of the central government. They are all below Gotabaya Rajapaksa, the president, and the parliament and the cabinet. They are not independent. They can't do whatever they want without asking your central government. Okay? Comparing to that, you take the USA. In the USA, it's different. In the USA, the state governments they have in different states, like New York, New Jersey, Texas, California, Arizona, Kansas, Nebraska, and all those small states they have a governor and a state legislature in all of them, and those are independent from the central government. They don't have to listen to Joe Biden to do everything. They can make their own decisions without asking Joe Biden in various areas, which is what makes them federal. What makes Sri Lanka unitary is our regional governments are under the control of the central government. They are subjected to their authority. Understand? Let's go with a different example, a relatable example, right? Let's say in your house, your father gives you a key saying this room is yours, right? Does that mean that that room is solely your territory? You can do whatever you want inside your room. You can bring over people when you want. You can throw a party there. You can bring in a TV, like a roommate. You can start a business there, right? No. You can paint the room in the color you want. Right? When the father hears the hammer hitting the nail, he's going to come and shout at you, right? Why? Because he's the central government of the house. You have to ask. True that he gave you the key, but it was like, father, is it okay if I change the color of these walls? He has to give you the approval, right? And is it okay if I put a nail here to hang this whatever, this painting or whatnot, right? And that key he gave you, he can take that key back whenever he wants. At any point, he could be like, give me the key back. You have to return it. Now imagine if your father writes a deed or he enters into a written contract with you saying this room is your territory. Your room will still be a part of the entire property, entire house, and your father will still be the central government, right? But you will have a better autonomy at making your own decisions now, which means you can put nails wherever you want and hang whatever you want. You can paint it if you want, right? You can bring in people, not a problem, right? And all that. Only thing is you will have to sort of like take your father's permission to do something that affects other people in the house. Like you won't be able to start a bakery or something like that because, like the smoke may come and it might affect the others. You can't bring in a roommate because, the others in the family can get exposed to him, right? So it's the same way that works. Unitary means like the central government being that father. It's like Gotabaya Rajapaksa giving a key to the central Western Province Chief Minister. Basnaya Mahathir, this is the key. Western Province is yours. But still, it means you still have to ask Gotabaya before whatever you do in your province. Right? In the USA, it's the other way around. In the USA, the Constitution has given powers. So it's like writing a deed. The US Constitution has given powers saying that New York has its own autonomy. So inside New York, they can build schools, they can build houses, they can build hospitals, they can make roads, right? They have their own budget, they can tax their people the way they want, right? And all that because it's like your father writing a deed and giving you that room. The only thing you can't do the things that affects other states and like the entire country. You can't have your own army. You can't enter like agreements with other countries. New York governor can't sign treaties with other countries, right? New York can't have their own army. Texas can't sort of like go into an agreement with Mexico, whatever. So because those things, those important things, you still have to consult your central government. Things like national security, national economy, foreign diplomacy, those things you can't. But when it comes to everything internal, domestic, you have your own autonomy. Schools, right? Education, health, transport, taxation, welfare, anything that you can do that whatever in your the way you want, right? Now, if you take USA, different countries have so different states have different laws because they are federal. Right now in Sri Lanka, we have the same legal system everywhere in our country, right? It's the same legal system that applies to everywhere. Doesn't matter whether you are in Jaffna or whether you are in Colombo, whatever. There are small laws like the Tesavalame law and all those are only for property in Jaffna, but comparing to everything else, criminal law and all, it's the same law that applies to everyone everywhere in the country, right? When it comes to things like marriage, property, yes, you have the Tesavalame law, the Muslim law, and the common law, whatnot. But when it comes to criminal law and all those things, it's the same law that applies to everyone. But in the US, it's different. For an example, there's Kansas and Missouri, two states that are close to one another. Fun fact is that they have a city called Kansas City, but it's actually in Missouri, right? Because it used to be in Kansas, but when they drew the borders later, Kansas City went to the Missouri area. So Kansas is like this, Missouri is like this. Inside Missouri, you have the Kansas City, right? So the thing is, I'm not sure which is which, but in one of the states, the legal age of drinking is lower. I think in Kansas it's 18 and in Missouri it's 21. So people live in the border of Missouri. If the young people, if they want to grab a drink, what they do is they walk to the other state because in those bars you can buy a drink. In your own bars, you can't. It's like that. So even when it comes to certain things like, the southern states are very religious. So in Alabama and all, they don't allow gay marriages and all, LGBT rights and all. So much so that, the recent Beauty and the Beast movie was banned from theaters in Alabama because apparently there was this scene of two men dancing. Like it's a gay couple dancing, right? Compared to that, you go to the upper side in Vermont and all, they have allowed gay marriages. It's because like it's different from state to state because they're federal. Right? Now imagine in a house, the father writes deeds and gives these rooms to each person. So that's your territory. Right? So maybe in your room, playing music in a loud noise is allowed. In your sister's room, maybe she doesn't allow it. Right? In your room, people are allowed to, visitors are allowed to mess things up. Right? Maybe your sister's room, she's very OCD, she wants to keep things in order. Right? But if the country is unitary, if your house is unitary, everything depends on your father. If your father is cool with you all messing things up, you all can mess anywhere. If your father is like very tidy and all, you would want the entire house to be very tidy. Different rules don't apply to different rooms because everything comes down to the central authority. Understand? Even if you take schools, for example, there are some schools that are like huge. Now, into Ananda College, our school was like reasonably pretty big. We had around like a couple of thousands of students, right? So because of that, our principal doesn't necessarily get involved in like all the minor facts. Like he doesn't check whether like the arts faculty and whether we have our classrooms properly and all that. Our sectional head took care of those things. Our principal was dealing with the education ministry. He was dealing stuff regarding the big match, right? Or like, students' uniform, student discipline, whatnot, like the things that apply to the entire school, right? So we had a couple of broken fans in art section, right? It was our sectional head who actually got them fixed. Principal wasn't even notified because our school is big. The principal can't walk into every classroom and check whether all the facilities are there, which is why our sectional heads had the power to check if there are broken fans or something like that. They are given a certain amount of budget and they utilize the budget to get those fixed. Compared to some small schools where you only have like one classroom for art section, one classroom for commerce section, right? For grade 7, 7A, 7B, just two classes, 8A, 8B. Entire school has about like 300, 400 students. In that case, the principal controls everything. If we have to get a broken fan fixed in one of those schools, the teacher will have to talk to the principal. Principal will have to pass the budget and get that fixed, right? In a bigger school, the teacher will only have to talk to the sectional head because the sectional head has the power. And the principal takes care of like upper level matters, right? So in a country also like Sri Lanka, you have Gotabaya Rajapaksa who looks into everything that happens, right? Because it's unitary. Okay, and whoever he has put as regional governments, chief ministers and all, they are sort of like responsible, answerable to the central government. But in the US, what the president does is he takes care of the foreign policy, he takes care of like national security and all that, and he doesn't necessarily talk about education or health or whatever because those things are handled by their regional rulers. Understand? That's the first thing you need to clarify. That is the first thing you need to clarify, that unitary means the regional governments are under the control of the central government, right? Federal means regional governments are independent. Why is that? We learned something called sovereignty, right? In a federal country, the sovereignty is shared. Okay, unitary country, sovereignty is not shared. Sovereignty comes to that one central authority. Okay, federal countries, of course, the regional governments get a certain amount of sovereignty to their hands as well, which is why they are independent. All right. Okay, so let's read the note as we usually do, right? So, Tasha, please start from here, forms of government, and read until, let's see. Yeah, so basically unitary is a small note. So just read the entire note for unitary, just a few, about 3, 4 pages. Okay, Tasha, you're up.
Forms of government according to how sovereign power is shared and organized. Although in theoretical politics, sovereign power is indivisible and impossible to share, in practical politics, sovereign power is often shared and organized in different formats. Governments can be categorized according to this fact: unitary model, federal model, semi-federal model, confederate. Um, Unitary model of government. In the unitary model of government, sovereign power is located at the central government. Although local government authorities exist, their power is under the authority of the central government. This creates a system of centralized government power, which means that the local government bodies are incapable of acting independently. The unitary model is usually suitable for geographical smaller countries with less ethnic diversity. In comparison to the federal format, the unitary structure is far less complex. However, there are different formats for the connection between the central government and local government authorities in a unitary country as well. Deconcentration, decentralization, devolution. Main features of the unitary model: the sovereign power of the state is vested in one solitary national level political institution. The central government possesses all the sovereign power without sharing any with regional bodies, unless supreme political power is delegated to the regional government. Local government authorities do exist on a regional grassroots level, although the central government has complete authority over these bodies. The legislature of the central government has the option of being either unicameral or bicameral, unlike a federal system where it is compulsory to have a bicameral legislature. Most unitary countries prefer a unicameral legislature, although some unitary countries, such as Great Britain and France, have bicameral legislatures by choice. In general, in comparison to federalism, the unitary system is considered to be less expensive and more efficient. This can change in practical politics due to various reasons. Recent developments in the unitary format. Although unitary governments are supposed to centralize political power within the central government, recent developments have introduced several methods to make regional governments powerful within a unitary country. Since having powerful regional governments bodies is considered an important feature of democracy, various methods are used to delegate more power to regional governments without compromising the unitary format. In Sri Lanka, this has been a trending topic since the early 90s as a result of the ethnic conflict. In every election, pretty much every mainstream candidate has focused on this topic in their policy papers. Different methods of dividing power within a unitary format. Deconcentration. Deconcentration.
Hold on. That's okay. We'll discuss that part, and we'll move on to the different methods. Okay. Right. So what does the note say in the very beginning? Right. This is the first thing that they say. In the unitary model of government, sovereign power is located at the central government. Highlight that, or if you might not have the printed note in your hand. If you do, highlight that part. Located at the central government, right? Which is why it is not divided, it is not shared. What makes a unitary country? Although local government authorities exist, again important, because this is what people miss out. That's why they end up saying that there are no regional governments in unitary systems. That's wrong. There are, right? Although local authorities exist, their power is under the authority of the central government. Always keep in mind how your father would give you a key and how he can take that key back, right? This creates a system of centralized government power, which means that local government bodies are incapable of acting independently, right? They are incapable of acting independently. They can't act alone, right? The unitary model is usually suitable for geographically smaller countries with less ethnic diversity, right? Smaller countries, as you all know, a country like Sri Lanka or Singapore, those countries can be governed this way because like the central government handling everything, right? Because if the country is big, the regions have to have more powers. Regions have to have more powers because central government can't control that big of a country, right? When the country is bigger, the population is bigger, and when you have more diverse, like like in India, if you have different diversity people living in different ethnic people living with a diversity, they have different desires. So because of that, the more diverse your country and more what do you call that? More diverse your country, more larger your country, more populous your country is, it's better to be federal. Understand? Right? Unitary means keeping all the powers together. However, you need to keep in mind, guys, even in a unitary country, they still use certain methods to make sure that the center does not have all the powers. Right? They use different methods. What are the three methods? These three you need to memorize. There's going to be, mark my word today, I told you today, just check in a few months, there's going to be one question from this somewhere in the paper. Either there's going to be an MCQ, or there will be a short question, or there's going to be a writing question, right? These three will come somewhere in the A-level paper: deconcentration, decentralization, and devolution. Okay. So we'll get to those three later. For now, main features of the unitary model. What are the main features, right? What's the first one? Now, as we saw, unitary systems are far less complex. Why? Just one country in charge, one government in charge for the entire country, and they control others. This is pretty Pretty simple, straightforward, right? Compared federal systems, you have to clarify these are the stuff you can do, these are the stuff I will be doing, and all that. This is much more simpler. So, sovereign power of the state is vested in one solitary national level political institution. That's number one. Okay, sovereign power of the state is vested in one solitary national level political institution. That's number one. The central government possesses all the sovereign power without sharing any with regional bodies. That's another important thing, which is what makes countries unitary in the first place. Then thirdly, local government authorities do exist on a regional grassroots level, although the central government has complete authority over these bodies, right? Central government has pretty much all the powers. Then legislature of the central government has the option of being either unicameral or bicameral. Okay, I will be explaining this when we are studying federal. For now, keep in mind there are two types of legislatures in the world. There are unicameral legislatures, there are bicameral legislatures. Uni means one, bi means two. So I believe that you all are familiar with basic English. Uni means one, bi means two, right? Okay, of course. Bi means two. I'm certain that guys are aware of it. Okay, right, two. Okay. I'm not sure how, not that I'm not sure, I am exactly sure how you all are familiar with the fact that bi means two. Doesn't matter, the point is you all know that, and that's going to come in handy when you all are doing your education. Okay, right. So, which means you all should be knowing bi means the parliament has two chambers, parliament or what are the legislature, right? So in that case, Sri Lanka is a unicameral legislature because we only have one parliament. Right. Countries like USA, they have the lower house and they have the Senate, right? House of Representatives and the Senate. So those countries have two houses. They are called bicameral legislatures. So the point here is just something you need to keep in mind. If your country is federal, it is compulsory to have. It is compulsory to have a bicameral legislature. We will see why when we discuss federalism. Okay. When we discuss federal format of government, we'll see. For now, keep in mind, guys, the point is, if you are federal, it is a must. You should have a bicameral legislature. In contrast, if your country is unitary, you can have either unicameral or bicameral. It's optional for you. Now, Sri Lanka is a unitary country, right? We are a unitary country, which is what gives us the freedom to have a unicameral or a bicameral legislature as we prefer. And we prefer to have a unicameral legislature. We only have one parliament. We prefer it that way because it's less expensive. Otherwise, we'll have to sustain another parliament. It's going to be another expense. Right? But countries like France, Great Britain, them being unitary, they are still going with the bicameral legislature. They prefer it that way because it's more democratic having our powers. Right? Okay, so that's the next point. If you are unitary, you have the option of going either unicameral or bicameral. Right? In general, in comparison to federalism, the unitary system is considered to be less expensive and more efficient, right? Because if you only have one government, central government, it's efficient. You don't have other people getting into conflicts, other governments getting into conflicts, and less expensive also. Because you don't have to spend a lot of money, you don't have to sustain a lot of governments, because you basically have one central government to sustain and the other regional governments are like, too small, they won't cost you a lot. But this can change in practical politics, as the note suggests, right? Now, a country like Sri Lanka, us being a unitary country, we are still inefficient, right? We are still inefficient and it is still expensive because for that one government we spend a lot of money, right? For every minister you have to buy like a bulletproof vehicle. You get them like 4 bulletproof vehicles and pay their staffs and all that, right? So a country like, I don't know, maybe a country like Switzerland may go federal, but their ministers ride the bicycle to the parliament. They don't spend a lot of money paying these salaries and giving them like houses and vehicles or whatnot. So they are federal, they still spend less money than us to sustain the government, right? So it can change in practical politics, even in efficiency, right? A country like USA being federal, they are still efficient. because the people are efficient. Sri Lanka being unitary, we are still inefficient because the only government they have the powers, they are very inefficient. Okay, so it can change according to the practical circumstances, right? But according to the book, according to the theory, unitary is supposed to be less expensive. It's like this. Now imagine something like this. Imagine a theory says that um, more financially stable the parents are, students have a better opportunity at studying. That's theoretically that's true, right? If the parents are rich, that means they won't have issues paying the school fees, class fees, transport, buying textbooks, whatever. So more richer the parents are, it should be easier for the students to study. But in practical, that's not how it happens, right? In practicality, maybe middle class, poor class students work harder, and richer class kids might get spoiled and they might not study. That's practicality. But in theory, if the parents are fine, more stronger parents, financial status supposed to make the study education of the students stronger. It should, but in practical it can change. Same applies here. If you are unitary, ideally it's supposed to make things less expensive and more efficient. But in practicality, a country like Sri Lanka, unitary the federal, we are always inefficient and we always waste money, right? So country like Switzerland, being federal, they are still less. They spend lesser amount of money and they are more efficient than us. So it changes in practical politics. Anyways, I think it's pretty straightforward and you all must have understood. Yes, yes.
So unitary government, is it like a one-party system?
No, 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 no. Now take Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is a unitary country, but we have like a sort of two-party dominant multi-party system. It's only one government. There can be multiple political parties, right? They contest in the election. Whoever wins, they get that government. That's all. Think of Sri Lanka. Think of Sri Lanka, right? Not one party system. It's just one government. There can be different parties contesting to get that governmental power, right? Federal means you have different governments here and there, not political parties, like different governments. You have a government for the entire country, and your region has a regional government that has some independence. Now, in Sri Lanka, also, we have regional governments, provincial councils, Colombo municipal councils, whatever, but they are not independent, right? They have to take permission from the central government to do certain things. But in federal countries, now, if Sri Lanka was federal, Western province would have its own government. And that government would be capable of doing certain things without taking permission from the central government. We still have a regional government, Western province, right? We have a Western Provincial Council, but they are not independent. Understand? Political parties has nothing to do with that, right? You have one government. Party system comes into play when it comes to elections, right? If you have more parties contesting elections, it's a that's how party system changes. Now, let's take three countries for example, right? You take China. China is a unitary country. China is a unitary country with a one-party system, right? Great Britain is a unitary country with a two-party system, right? Sri Lanka is a unitary country, or France is a unitary country with a multi-party system. There's only one government that controls the country. There can be different numbers of parties contesting for that, right? It is different from countries like India or USA because in India, right? Because in India, you have one government for the entire country, and who's the leader of that government? Narendra Modi, Indian Prime Minister. But in Tamil Nadu, in Karnataka, in Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Punjab, Uttar Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh, each state has its own government, right? So it's a federal country. And those governments are independent up to a certain extent. Okay. India has some sort a little bit of a catch in their constitution, which we'll get to that. But for now, keep in mind that's the difference. Understood? Any doubts? No, right? Okay.
Sir,
Yes, yes, sir.
We lost your connection, so couldn't hear properly. So last part.
I was explaining how the party system and the government are two different things. I was like how China is a unitary country with one party system, Great Britain is a unitary country with a two-party system, France is a unitary country with a multi-party system, right? So it's just one government that is in charge of everything. In a federal country, you have that central government and the regional government has some independency, right? So like in Sri Lanka, you still have a Western Province Provincial Council, but that provincial council has to take prior authority from the central government before doing something, right? But if Sri Lanka was a federal country, our Western Provincial Council can do things without asking from the central government because they are independent and they hold a part of sovereignty. Okay, that's what I was explaining. Right. Anyways, now think practically, think according to common sense and tell me, is it good if a country is unitary from a democratic perspective? Is it very democratic if a country is unitary? It's not very democratic because there's one government having all the powers, all the sovereignty powers centralized around them. Right now in Sri Lanka, technically Gotabaya Rajapaksa and the parliament gets to make all the decisions in the country. Right? Southern province can't, do something different unless they get the approval from the central government, right? That's not very democratic. And sometimes in certain areas, some people can have very different desires. Now, this is another argument we have in Sri Lanka. Some people in Sri Lanka argue saying that Sri Lanka should be federal. And what is the argument they give? What is the reason they give? Because people in Jaffna, northern province, it's a very different atmosphere, different culture there, right? Different. It feels very different when you go to Jaffna. They speak a different language, culture is different, habits, patterns, everything is very, very different, right? So those people have different necessities, different things they need. And people in Colombo don't really understand that sometimes because of the context we grew up in, right? Now, because of that, sometimes those people might have needs that the central government leader don't understand, which is why they say make it federal. So Jaffna and the northern province will have their own government that necessarily doesn't have to take prior permission from us, our president and the parliament to take before doing something, right? So make federal, Sri Lanka federal. That's the argument. But going federal can have some, what do you call that, some backlashes, which we'll look into when we study federal, we'll look into it, right? How going federal can sometimes result in like um, not necessarily positive things, which is why people say don't go federal, okay? But the point I want to make here is that sometimes unitary can be a little bit of a problem because it centralizes power. And with common sense, in democracy, you don't centralize power. You try to divide it. You try to give power, this person, that person, try to divide it as much as you can. Now imagine a situation where Sri Lanka has to divide the power, but we don't want to go federal either. Okay? Think of a situation. You are the president of the country and you need to sort of like make sure that the power is not centralized in the central government. You need to make sure that the lower levels get the power, but you don't want to go federal also. Is there a way? Is there a way? Nashita, is there a way to give away power to lower levels from the central government without compromising your unitary format? Without going federal, do you have a way? Do you have an option to give away power to lower levels without compromising your unitary nature? Do you have a way or not?
No, I do not.
Yes, not just one, my child. There are three. There are three options. There are three ways that you can actually give away powers to the lower levels without compromising unitary nature. Imagine you are a unitary country. You want to give away powers to the lower governments, but you don't want to go federal also, right? Imagine, Nashita, you are the president, right? Someday you are the president. Okay, so you have like taken decisions to give what do you call that, free makeup stuff, cosmetic products to girls, right? And free chocolate to all the students in schools, and those are the decisions you made, right? And all the ministers get a teddy bear or whatever, I don't know, like, you know, whatever the decisions you make. Mhm. Now you have a bigger decision to make. Now President Nashita is thinking, "Hmm, I have to give powers to lower levels of the governments. I have to make sure that Colombo Municipal Council and whatever, all these places get more powers. I have to make sure that I don't keep all these powers in the central government. I give away powers to lower levels, right? How should I do that?" Now, as Nashita says, she thought there's no option, right? So Nashita thinks you don't have an option. You can't give powers. So she, of course, remembers that there was a guy who taught political science to her a couple of decades ago, right, called Imhan, right? So she wants to check whether he's still alive because she hasn't spoken to him after she did A levels. Okay, and then she looks him up. Okay, he's alive. Then she takes a call to Imhan. I'd be like, "Sir, do you remember me?" Of course. Like, of course I remember. You are the one who thought that there's no option for you to give away powers to lower layers, right? When I asked in the class, you said no, right? And you'll be like, "Yes, that's the exact thing that I have at the moment. I'm the president right now, right? And I want to give powers to the lower layers. What are the options?" I will be like, "Well, Nashita, there are two formats. One is unitary, one is federal, right? Federal means your regional government, lower level governments are independent, right? Unitary means they are not, they are under you. So what country you are leading at the moment?" She'll be like, "I am the president of a unitary country at the moment." That means, okay, that means regional governments in your country are under your control. They are not independent, right? She's like, "Yes." Then I'll be like, "Okay, would you like to go federal?" She'll be like, "No, I don't want to go federal. I don't want these regional governments to be independent, but I want to give them power. Is there an option?" I'll be like, "Dear Nashita, there are three options, not one. There are three options, right?" And I told you when I was doing an online class to remember these three words because in the political paper, A-level paper, these three will come somewhere in the paper, either as an MCQ or as a short question or as a writing question. It's going to be somewhere in the political paper. What are the three options? Deconcentration, decentralization, and devolution. Those three. You need to remember those three. Okay. These are the three options you have if you want to give power away in the sense like to lower levels without compromising being unitary. You still can be unitary and follow one of these methods to give powers to the lower layers. These are the options you can take to give powers to the lower levels within the unitary format. Within the unitary format. You don't have to go all the way being federal. You can follow one of these options. Now let's see what do these options mean one by one. So I'm going to explain first, then we'll take a look at the note. Right. What are the options? What is the first one? Deconcentration. In fact, I'll explain all three. And now we are going to use a different example. Now, different hypothetical environment. Okay. Now imagine something like this. Now imagine I am the Minister of Agriculture and you guys are my staff. You all are my staff in the Ministry of Agriculture. Okay. So what are we in charge of? We are supposed to look after the farmers in Sri Lanka, right? Like, long story short, there's a lot of things we need to do if we are the agriculture ministry. Mainly, we are supposed to take care of the farmers in Sri Lanka, entire country, right? Because Sri Lanka is a unitary country. So the central government has a minister of agriculture that I'm supposed to take care of. We are supposed to take care of the agriculture of the entire country. Okay, right. Now imagine one day, couple of people come visit us in the ministry, right? And these people say that they are from Jaffna and they are farmers in Jaffna. Okay. Now they come and tell us about a pest problem or a soil problem or something like that that affects particularly their crops. there are crops that are in Jaffna, right? Now, first things first, I don't think any of us in the class have any roots to Jaffna. No, right? In my other classes, I have like a couple of Tamil students, they of course have, but here I don't think. None of you all have roots to Jaffna. I've of course been to Jaffna about 2 times, but no roots, right? So I think it's safe to assume none of us in the class are familiar with how things work in Jaffna. So first of all, the crops they are talking about, we've never seen them, right? We've never lived there for a longer time, so we don't know how these crops issue work. We don't understand how this problem affects them, simply because none of us are from Jaffna. And we are located in Colombo here, right? Our office is in Colombo here. So we don't know how it works. We can't address their problem properly because we don't know how this cultivation works in Jaffna. But we are responsible for this, right? Because we are the agriculture ministry, and Jaffna being a part of Sri Lanka, we are supposed to help their problem. We are supposed to help these farmers. But we don't know how to do this. And also, these people can't be traveling from Jaffna to Colombo every day to be telling us. We need to do something about this, right? Now, if our country was federal, this wouldn't be a problem. Why? Northern Province would have their own government, and they will handle that. We won't even know. In Colombo, we wouldn't even get to know. They might have the problem with their crops. Their government would handle that. We don't even know that problem existed in the first place. Now that we are unitary, we have to attend this. They have to come looking for us, right? So I tell these farmers, right, these Jaffna farmers, right, don't worry. I will do something. You'll go home. And I send them home. Now I need to do something about this. So I have a staff meeting. I bring you all together. Right? And I ask, what are the options that you all can take? Right? And Rifki is like, sir, are there any option that we can do? We are a unitary country, right? We can't go federal. If we were federal, it won't be a problem because they would have their own government anyway, right? Do we have any options? So in this parallel universe, Nashita says there are options. She says, yes, there are options, right? There are 3 options, right? So in this universe, even I don't know these 3 options exist. I'm the minister, which means I'm supposed to be dumb, I guess, right? So Nashita is like, sir, we have 3 options: deconcentration, decentralization, and devolution. Okay. So let's see how this applies one by one. First, deconcentration. This is the least effective one actually, but the most simpler one nonetheless, right? What's the first thing we can do? I can relocate some of my staff in this area, right? I'll be like, Nashita and Tasha, the 2 of y'all, pack your bags. I am locating y'all in Jaffna for the next 6 months. Understand? So I start a small office in Jaffna, like a small branch, and I relocate some of my people there. Okay, it's just a matter of Nashita and Tasha going there and attending and checking what the problem and solving these Jaffna farmers' problem. They are still getting salary from my ministry, from the central government. Not that I have, established any institution there. It's just a branch of what I have here. It's technically a branch of our ministry there, like a branch of the central government there. I just relocated my staff. Simple as that. Deconcentration means relocating the staff. You just put the central government staff there, right? Rashida and Tasha, you two go to Jaffna, right? And attend this problem. And when you all come, bring kotta kilangu. That's a sort of like a snack that you get from Jaffna, right? Apita kotta kilangu aragena, the talhapuru aragena, right? Whatever you can get from Jaffna, get those, those sweets and stuff that they have in Jaffna and bring them and come after 6 months, attending the problem. So what have I done here as the central government Minister of Education? I have relocated my staff in these rural areas, in these areas that the central government can't access directly. So deconcentration. We didn't compromise being unitary. We are still unitary, and we still address the problems. Right? But as I told you, it's not necessarily that effective because these two are still from here, right? They still don't know, although I just kept them there, and they are not going to stay there forever. They are just going to stay there for a few months and address the problem for now and come back. What is the problem? Returns. Right? Not very effective. Because of that, we can try decentralization. How does that work? Right? You guys know there are local government authorities, municipal councils and all that, right? So Jaffna has a municipal council, right? Or whatever this area they're talking about, that might have an urban council, or at least a divisional council. Like a Pradesh Sabha, they should have, right? Let's say Akkare Pattu Pradesh Sabha. These people are from there. Or Chava Kacheri or somewhere like that, right? Or Vadukode or somewhere like that. So what we do is, right? So first I propose deconcentration. I'll be like, okay, let's send Nashid and Tasha there and let's solve the problem. Then Rashid raises his hand and says, sir, I don't think this will be effective because Nashid and Tasha, they are from here. They grew up here. They don't know anything about this, Jaffna soil or these pest problems they have. And they'll just go there, give a temporary solution and come back. Then the problem might occur again. So let's not do the deconcentration part. They will, okay, let's go to plan B. Decentralization. How does this work? I take a phone call to the mayor of Jaffna or that Chava Kacheri or whatever that Pradesh Sabhas, like the divisional councils, chairman, right? I contact that local government authority and be like, is this the Jaffna mayor? Yes, I am the agriculture minister of agriculture from the central government. I called to tell you that I got to know that in your area, these farmers are suffering from whatever this problem, right? So regarding this matter, regarding this pest problem or whatever this problem, you all can make decisions on your own. I'm going to give you the authority to handle this problem, tackle this problem, right? So whenever this problem occurs, the mayor of Jaffna can address that problem without necessarily contacting us. So those Jaffna farmers can go and talk to their mayor, right? So deconcentration means handing over those powers to that local government authority. Understand? To the mayor of that area or Pradesh Sabha Sabhapati. You just tell the person, I just told you phone call just to make the example more realistic. In reality, what happens is you send the letter, like proper letter, official letter saying that regarding this matter, you have the full power to address. So we don't have to bother, that person will handle that problem. That sounds more promising than just sending our staff there, right, under deconcentration. But the third one is even better. What's the third one? Devolution. Devolution means giving them a regional government, but which is still under our control, but giving them a regional government. Establishing a provincial council. Let's have a provincial council for Jaffna, for the northern province. Northern province will have their own provincial council. Eastern province will have their own provincial council. That means that province gets a small government. What are the three houses of the government? Executive, legislature, judiciary, right? You give three of them to that area. The provincial council is their legislature. Their chief minister and the ministers are their executive. And there's a provincial high court as the judiciary, right? So it's sort of like federal, but the thing is they don't have that sovereignty power. They don't share sovereignty power with us. They are still under us. Okay, they are still under our control. Okay. Sri Lanka has provincial councils, right? Since 1987, we've been having provincial councils in our country. That means what? We have applied devolution of powers to Sri Lanka. In 1987, we established provincial councils to implement devolution of powers in Sri Lanka. Okay, Sri Lanka has devolution of powers. Even Great Britain has devolution of powers, right? This is technically being federal without being federal sort of situation. Understand, right? So you give them a government, no, that way that they have Jaffna, and then those areas, Kilinochchi and Vavuniya, those areas, they have their own government, which is still under the central government authority, but at least they have a government that they can address those issues, right? Those farmers don't have come talk to us because they have a northern province minister of agriculture who can attend those matters, right? But they can't make big decisions. Now imagine they have to import some pesticides to tackle this problem. Let's say they have to import some pesticides from Pakistan or something like that. That they have to tell us, right? Northern Province Provincial Council can't import stuff from Pakistan. They have to tell us that. Then the Northern Province minister will come and talk to me saying that, we need to import these. And then I will talk to the parliament and I'm going to import those pesticides and address the problem. Now, do you understand the three methods? Now you saw we gave powers to lower layers without really compromising the unitary format. We are still a unitary country, right? But without going all the way to being federal, we still gave powers to lower layers. Okay, right. Rifki, do you have the note? So please read deconcentration, decentralization, devolution, these three. Rifki.
Should I read?
Yes, yes. Please read.
Okay. From where?
From different methods of dividing power within a unitary format.
Different methods of dividing power within a unitary format. Deconcentration. Deconcentration is an entirely administrative measure in this system. Staff of the central government are relocated to various local locations with the objective of expanding public administration. This is done in order to make the administrative system more accessible to citizens as well as to lower administrative costs. Decentralization. This is aimed at transferring responsibilities of policy implementation to subnational units. Under this system, local government authorities are allowed to implement welfare services which do not necessarily require the approval of the central government. This system is applied in Britain as well as Scandinavian countries. Devolution. This is considered the most effective method of delegating power. Devolution is aimed at transferring a range of legislative and decision-making powers, including executive and judicial powers, to local institutions. This is widely used in France, Italy, etc. Even the United Kingdom applied devolution to grant powers to Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland in 1999. However, the British format of devolution is favorable to the central government as the given power can be taken back at any time through a parliamentary act. All these power dividing methods inside a unitary country are generally done through the ordinary law. Therefore, these given powers are not supreme and can be taken by the central government at their discretion.
Right. This is important. Now you see it says ordinary law and the fact that it's a parliamentary act. Okay, if you have a paper somewhere, just jot that down, right? There are two types of laws. Now, there are different ways to categorize laws, civil law, criminal law, international law, domestic law, whatever. But here we are taking something important, an important way of categorizing law. First of all, you have um, ordinary law, then you have the fundamental law, right? Ordinary law means something that is passed in the parliament, an act that is passed in the parliament, right? So basically, the majority of the parliament likes that, and that's a parliamentary act, right? So whatever you implement that way is an ordinary law. right? Fundamental means it is included in the constitution of the country, right? Why do you call that the Parliamentary Act an ordinary law? What a right? The ordinary law, that is fundamental. This is ordinary. Why do you say that? Because something that is enacted by the Parliament can also be reversed by the Parliament itself. Parliament passes and says you have the power. Next day they pass that again and say you don't have that power. Understand? Remember, the father gives you the key. The father can take the key back. The Parliament can give you the power. Parliament can take that power back. Ordinary law, just by passing an act, right? You pass an act in the Parliament. Majority of the Parliament says yes, fine, the act is passed, and the regional government has power. Next day, Parliament passes another one, says, majority says no, and they take that power back from the regional government. Fundamental law, that's when you incorporate that in your constitution, inside the constitution. In the constitution, you mention that regional governments have these powers, right? So if you want to change that, you have to change the entire constitution, which the Parliament can't do one-sided once you go federal, because the regional governments also have to agree, right? So if your father writes a deed, or if he enters into a contract, agreement, a written contract, an agreement to give you that room, he can't revoke that one-sided. He'll have to sign a new contract. He'll have to change the contract, which is going to require your consent as well, right? It's not like giving the key and taking the key back, which is why it says fundamental law. In federal countries, the power is given from fundamental law. Understand? Right? Okay. So it explains the difference between these two. One more important thing is that in Sri Lanka, we have devolution of powers. The provincial council system works that way. And UK have been using devolution of powers. So they've given powers to Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, right? They started this in 1999. And we will be studying this in the 10th unit. We are studying 5 countries in detail. For now, this is enough that they've included devolution of powers, and you're all aware of that. That's cool enough. Okay. All right. So that's it for this class. We shall proceed the next class in a bit at 6:30. And we shall move forward with federal model of government. If it's possible, please take a printout of this note. If not, just download and keep the note with you all. Because even if there's a problem with the screen sharing, I still want you all to read the note properly. Yeah. Right. If you want, you all can stay till 6:30. I'm just going to leave the meeting like this, or you can leave and come back by 6:30. Okay. All right, guys.